This is part of the problem. Look, you can talk to any cabinet minister at any point in the past 18 months, and they probably have been depressed. They'll have probably, if they were being really honest with themselves or whoever was their interlocutor, whoever they were sharing a pint or a dinner with, most of them, the vast majority of them would say, I don't really understand this Keir guy. It's a bit of a mess. It's rudderless. It's directionless. What are we doing? We keep making self-inflicted mistakes. But they've endured that for a very, very long time.
Well, let's go straight away to the brilliant Patrick Maguire, who has written an absolutely brilliant column in today's Times paper. You can read it on the app or you can read it online, and he joins me now. Patrick, thanks very much for joining us. I know it's very busy for you right now.
Hi, Ayesha. Yeah, it's not a quiet week in
So,
Westminster.
where do you think things are as we head into this weekend with MPs going back to their constituencies?
Look, I have never known, as you say, I think your assessment of the mood in the Labour Party is completely right. I've never known, and I've been covering the Labour Party for a fraction of the time you've been working in and around the Labour Party, Aisha, but even by the sort of fairly volatile standards of the past year, I have never known Labour MPs, ministers, advisors to be as furious as they are now. I've never had as many messages from people saying they agree with something I've written as I did in the Times this morning. And what I said was, it's over. Now, over needn't mean an immediate declaration of death, but as a former senior advisor to Boris Johnson was saying to me last night, during that late Partygate period when Tory MPs were rebelling to vote for a standards investigation into Boris Johnson, this week felt very much like that. As this advisor to Boris Johnson said to me, the fuse had been lit. We just didn't know how long the fuse was, but we were skiing downhill and we couldn't see the end of the piste. It could have been 10 meters ahead of us, it could have been a mile ahead of us, but all we knew was it was over. And that is where the Prime Minister finds himself at the end of this truly remarkable, horrifying week for the Labour Party.
And why do you think it was that the Prime Minister sort of misjudged his responses at Prime Minister's questions so badly? Because, he has a very experienced briefing team. I've worked in that briefing team. They would have gamed out all the likely questions that Kemi Badenoch was going to ask. What do you think was going on there?
Well, look, I think he judged his eventual response to the question of, did you know there was an ongoing relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein's conviction? He judged that entirely correctly. He didn't lie.
Yeah.
He couldn't lie. That answer was unavoidable. And to a certain extent, it's sort of an unfair question because everybody knew that relationship continued. It was in the public domain. But saying it at the dispatch box, he tried a couple of times to avoid it, but asked that straight question very directly. He couldn't. And that's the ultimate problem. Once the Prime Minister has said he appointed someone who maintained a friendship after the conviction of the world's most famous, notorious, infamous, loathed paedophile, and that is the scale of magnitude we're talking about. I think we forget just how ubiquitous Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes have become in our culture. There was no coming back from that, but there was also no way of avoiding it. And it was the ultimate price he paid for that initial judgment to appoint Peter Mandelson. And it's remarkable that nobody ever thought maybe one day we will be asked this question.
But I think that gets to sort of what I was alluding to in my sort of monologue, which is a slightly sort of bigger point. It sort of didn't occur to anybody because I think in a way, maybe it would just be better to be more honest and say, look, we did know that Peter Mandelson was pretty dodgy, and we did know that he swam in some pretty sordid circles, but they were the same circles that Donald Trump moved in. We knew that Peter was very friendly with these kinds of men, and these are the kind of guys that Donald Trump does business with. That's in a way why he got the gig, because even though it's tawdry and it gives everybody the ick, we thought he was the best guy to do business with the guys that Donald Trump hangs around with. Would that not be more honest, Patrick?
I think the problem is, Aisha, I think you're absolutely right, and honesty is the key word. Every possible answer to this question involves a really unpalatable level of honesty about the way politics works globally, which is to say, we are all courtiers in the court of Donald Trump, and it's about bending the knee, it's about being sinuous, It's about ingratiating yourself. It's about knowing how to maneuver and manipulate. And Peter Mandelson was very good at all of those things. It involves waging a trade war, and Peter Mandelson, of course, had been an EU trade commissioner. So that sort of case would involve being really upfront about the nature of our alliance with the US and the nature of how politics actually works in terms of diplomacy, which is not pretty. But also the other honest answer. If Keir Starmer got up and said the truth, which is, I've never liked Peter Mandelson. He doesn't like me. Peter Mandelson basically thinks I'm a bit of a clown. I think Peter Mandelson is weird, and his habit of giving me unsolicited advice really aggravates me. And I don't understand these Blairites. I think they're part of the problem with the Labour Party. But he's really close to Morgan, and I do what Morgan McSweeney, my chief of staff, tells me because I don't really understand politics, and he does. That's hardly more flattering either. So there is no way of giving an answer to the question that doesn't ultimately make people feel really dispirited about politics.
And look, what happens next? Because obviously you're getting the same messages that I'm getting from people, which is absolute dismay. Yet I don't get any impression that anybody is going to mount a leadership challenge in the immediate future.
No. What's been striking this week is as depressed as members of the cabinet, members of the government are, there is no real impetus to do anything about it right now. Now, look, everything's very volatile, febrile, to use Westminster's favourite cliche. That might change in the coming hours, the coming days. Right now, for want of evidence that that's going to happen, I doubt it. But this is part of the problem. Look, you can talk to any cabinet minister at any point in the past 18 months, and they probably have been depressed. They'll have probably, if they were being really honest with themselves or whoever was their interlocutor, whoever they were sharing a pint or a dinner with, most of them, the vast majority of them would say, I don't really understand this Keir guy. It's a bit of a mess. It's rudderless. It's directionless. What are we doing? We keep making self-inflicted mistakes. But they've endured that for a very, very long time. And it doesn't really make sense for Wes Streeting to move now, given he will face lots of questions about his own friendship with Peter Mandelson. Not to say he's in any way guilty by association of anything Peter Mandelson is accused of. It's not great timing for Angela Rayner, of course. She's waiting for a verdict from HMRC. And once you get beyond that, sort of who is there to do it? All the usual suspects from cabinet you know to be annoyed with the direction of travel of this government haven't got up or said anything or done anything. So what's going to happen? Well, it will carry on for a bit because it always does. It has for so long.
And look, final question. I know you've got to run, but this is a question that's actually come up quite a few times, and I don't quite know the answer to this. Karen Pierce was the woman who was the ambassador in Washington. By all accounts, she was doing a good job. Could she have continued her term, or is it right to say that she wanted to go? What is the truth about that, Patrick?
Look, my understanding is that she definitely didn't want to go. She would have happily stayed. She had good relationships with Trump's team from his first term. Trump liked her personally. She was very highly regarded by people around the president. But they decided very early on in Keir Starmer's team, even before they had won the election, when they were in their access talks with senior civil servants, they were saying, we are going to make a political appointment. And the names mentioned in those talks, senior officials have told me since, included Peter Mandelson, David Miliband, Jonathan Powell, someone like that. So I think they had clearly decided the best way to manage whoever was the president was with a sort of Labour.
So that was their decision. And if they had wanted to keep her on to do another term, that could they have done? Does that happen? I mean, I believe it does happen. If an ambassador's doing a good job, they can be asked to stay if they want.
Yeah, indeed. And her term had already sort of been extended in an ad hoc way to sort of cover the transition period when they were choosing the new ambassador, because Rishi Sunak had already said he was going to appoint, I think it was Tim Barrow, who had been one of Boris Johnson's Brexit negotiators and national security advisors. So they rescinded that appointment. Karen Pierce could have stayed, and I think there'll be a lot of people in government saying, why did we not just keep Karen Pierce in the job?
Well, look, Patrick, really good to talk with you. Thank you so much for your time. That's the brilliant Patrick Maguire, chief political commentator for The Times. Do read his column today. It's very stark, but it is there'll be a lot of people who agree with it, and particularly within Labour ranks privately.